There once was a Greek warrior who wanted nothing more than to stop fighting and go home, to be with his wife, his son, and sleep in his own bed. Instead, the gods dealt a serious blow to his plans. Of course, the story of this warrior, named Odysseus, isn't true. It was made up by a Greek poet named Homer in the 9th century BC. But it's a story with a purpose, to explain a world filled with heroes, gods, and villains, the world of the ancient Greeks. The word mythology comes from the Greek word for storytelling. Before history and before science, myths were the stories people told to explain the world around them. The Odyssey is the most famous example of Greek mythology. It tells the story of Odysseus, who fought long and hard for Greece during the Trojan War. The Odyssey is about his attempt to return home to his wife Penelope and to the Greek island of Ithaca, where he is king. But his trip turns into a nightmare, a series of tests for the hero that puts him in one crisis after another. What should have been a 2-week trip from Troy to Ithaca ends up taking 10 years. It is these obstacles Odysseus must overcome that makes the book so exciting. It's a style of storytelling that still exists today. Think of action-adventure movie heroes like Indiana Jones. He's really just Odysseus with a hat. Trouble starts early for Odysseus and his crew when they land on the island of the Cyclops in search of food. Instead, they become food when this giant one-eyed monster eats some of the crew. Odysseus pays the Cyclops back with a sharp stick to the eye. He and the remaining crew escape, but as they're leaving, Odysseus can't resist bragging. He shouts, "The one who has blinded you! I am Odysseus, sacker of cities, king of Ithaca!"
And king of Ithaca!
Big mistake. The Cyclops' father is Poseidon, god of the sea. Poseidon condemns Odysseus to wander the sea and face difficult tests. Odysseus is suddenly in for a long and dangerous trip. He lands on the island of the witch Circe, who turns his men into pigs. After a year, they finally escape, only to end up crossing the path of more dangerous women, the Sirens. The Sirens were a group of women who used their seductive songs to lure sailors to their deaths. Fortunately for Odysseus, he has been warned. He has himself tied to the ship's mast so he can resist their singing. Having escaped the Sirens, Odysseus and his crew soon find themselves between a rock and a hard place. The deadly whirlpool Charybdis and the 6-headed monster Scylla, who lives in a cave above the sea. Odysseus must make a choice. Which is the lesser evil?
He always has choices. He has the choice of going past Scylla or taking the route of the whirlpool, and he's been told that if he takes the whirlpool, it's most likely that the whole ship will be destroyed, sucked down into this terrible Charybdis. On the other hand, he knows that if he goes past Scylla, he will lose 6 men. So he decides not to tell his men about that, because he realizes that if they knew that 6 of them would die, they would stop rowing in that direction. And he tries to fight Scylla, but she cannot be fought. He has been told that too. And before he even sees her coming, Scylla has taken 6 of his men and is eating them up in the mouth of her cave. And he thinks this is the most horrible sight he's ever seen. But he gets through.
The reward for getting through is to become stranded on the island of Calypso, a goddess who causes Odysseus to fall under her spell. She keeps Odysseus in prison for 7 years before the god Zeus orders her to let him go. Between the Trojan War and the sea voyage, Odysseus has been away from home for 20 years.
The tales have a purpose. They are not repetitive. They show Odysseus facing a number of different challenges, and as he goes through these tales, in each one of them he is invited to forget the return home, to forget home, to stop living in a way, to die.
Finally, Odysseus reaches Ithaca. He comes home disguised as a beggar and finds that the young men of his kingdom have taken over his household. They want Penelope to give up on her husband and remarry.
The Queen.
Penelope proposes a contest to her suitors. She agrees to marry the man who can string Odysseus's bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axes. The only man who can do it, of course, is Odysseus, still disguised as a beggar. After 20 years, he and Penelope are together again.
Odysseus' adventures, if we see them as tests, are much larger versions of the kinds of crises and problems and issues and adventures to which each of us is subject over the course of life. But what we all want, and what Odysseus above all has, is to be able to say, not only when he gets home, but when he's on his deathbed, man, I lived a life. And that's part of what makes him both such a rich source of entertainment and a kind of inspiration.
Yes, the Odyssey is a myth, but myth is not simply fiction. To the ancient Greeks, the gods who lived on Mount Olympus represented two things: the forces of nature like water, wind, and air, and the nature of man, desire, ambition, anger, and jealousy. Mythology taught the Greeks about the exploits of their heroes and the wisdom of their culture. It gave them an identity, a sense of national unity. And for the rest of us, Odysseus is the model for a kind of hero that still entertains and inspires us today.